All right, hi guys. So what we're going to do today is talk in brief about American society in the 1950s. A society, adjusting to peace, adjusting to prosperity, end of the Great Depression, Cold War, and I mean it's a very sexist society because as a nation we're coming to grips with the fact that obviously women have proven that they can go out, they can enter the workforce, they can build tanks, fly planes, but yet society still believes in what we call the separate spheres. We'll get to that in a second. Now, we're not really going to touch much on racism in this lecture because we're going to set that up next week talking about the civil rights movement. We're going to open with one of my favorite films that's guaranteed to piss you off, Crisis in Levittown, which pretty much just shows the turmoil and chaos of trying to push for integration. Understand this is a very segregated society. White people and black people, couldn't shop at the same places, couldn't drink at the same water fountains, and so I mean, this is a society that is vastly different from our own today. What I would like to do before I get started, I've had a couple of people ask about the ID terms. What the ID terms are is that's how you can kind of organize what I'm talking about, organize your notes, things that you should be mentioning in your essays, as well as for the exam. For the timed quiz, what I'll do is I think your list is, hang on a minute. Sorry, my ear popped. I think you have a list of 25. What I'll do is in the quiz, I will put 10 on there, a random sampling of 10, and you need to do the 5 that you know best. Ideally, you should be on your own defining them all now, or at least be familiar with all of them. What am I going to look for? As I state in the syllabus, and I'll go over this a bit more, I'll do an exam video, but I'm going to look for the date. When does it happen? I'm going to look for what the event is. Give me some details. I'm going to look for why it happened, who's involved, and probably most important, what is its overall significance, which, if you're not sure what I mean by that, significance, the best way that I use to define that is what is so special about, say, the Potsdam Conference that 71 years later I expect you to know what it is. Tell me what it leads to. What makes it so critically important to American history? They're not that hard. Ideally, they should be about 3 to 5 sentences. Take about, it's timed at 25 minutes. You're doing fine. Spend about 5 minutes for each one. And remember, the best way to get an A, convince me you know what you're talking about. Convince me that, you understand what's going on, you know what the term is, you know how it fits into the larger scheme of what we're talking about. And then when you're writing your essays, you might include a few of those. In fact, I have a number of students tell me, do the essays first. It's a great study guide because the ID terms are also kind of, what's the best word? Study guides as well as outlines. There we go. Outlines for the essays of things that you should be including as you write this stuff. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do today is pick up where we left off and talk again about this fear of domestic communists. And this is going to contribute to the Red Scare, which is going on in the midst of everything else. Okay? And the issue... Hang on, I got something stuck in my throat apparently. The thing is, people in the 1950s are absolutely paranoid. It occurs to me I did not post the How to Spot a Communist. I was sitting there all night thinking there was something I was supposed to post, and it literally just hit me. Don't worry, I will post it as soon as I can. But people start wanting a sense of conformity. They start wanting people to look the same, act the same, dress the same. This idea, this is what it means to be an American. And the reason they do so is because at this point, anything that is different would be treated as communist subversion. Oh, you want integration of white people and black people? You're a communist. You think women should have the same income as a man? You're a communist. Oh, you think the United States should not have such a military presence? You're a communist, okay? And it gets so bad, I mean, we call it a Red Scare, and we see this a lot more with McCarthy, which we'll talk about in a second, but we're afraid of, communists taking over the government. We're afraid that, Reds are going to immigrate from, Eastern Europe or Spain or wherever. We're afraid that people in the government, maybe not the president, but key positions, are actually going to be communists and feed bad advice to government officials. Now, why does this happen? Simple. This is an outgrowth of the fear of nuclear war. At some level, okay, individual Americans, even, senators, congressmen, mayors, stuff like that, you can't really control whether or not the Soviet Union flies bombers over here and drops a nuke on Washington, D.C. You can't control that. But you have this fear, and that fear has to go somewhere, and this is the easiest target of opportunity. And what makes this so crazy is we're afraid at this time when, if you were to remove the Cold War from the picture, there's no reason to be afraid. Okay? We see a massive economic boom. Okay? We see that the GNP by 1960 is going to double from what it was in 1945. Most people earning more money, but yet they're working less than 40 hours a week. Yeah, you got some people working 40, but now 40 hours a week is the standard. Many work less. Industrial expansion through all but the Midwest and the South. We see that whereas in the 1920s, okay, factories produce more than the people can consume, overconsumption, right? One of the causes of the Great Depression. Now factories can't meet demand. Literally, those factories that have been churning out rifles and tanks and stuff like that, there was not a problem of them converting to civilian stuff and then going out of business. Literally, they're cranking out fridges, microwaves, radios. Now televisions are the hot new commodity. And, people can't buy enough of this stuff. We see that the 1950s, economically, it's a complete reversal of the Great Depression. And we see, population boom. I mean, think about it. You're coming home from war. You've been overseas for 5 years. Okay? What's the first thing you're going to do? ... right? Well, what we're going to see in 10 years from 1945 to 1955, a 19% increase in the population. Apparently, you're so excited you don't have time to stop off at the gas station and, spend, 5 cents back in the 40s. People have a lot of babies. So now you're faced with, okay, you have a lot of people having kids, a lot of people having good jobs, people working, less than 40 hours a week. We see probably the highest standard of living the United States has ever achieved. With that, you see sprawling urban centers. Remember how I mentioned the film Crisis at Levittown? This is Levittown, Pennsylvania right here. And this is the start of a new type of American community, a new type of boomtown. Just mass-produced houses where a lot of people could start moving away from the farms to the cities in order to get jobs, okay? So if we look at suburban society, what it would be like to live in this type of, place, okay? Cities are going to be crowded. But if you know much about cities in, say, the Progressive Era, the ideas of the tenement houses, so 5 people living in a dorm room type space, whole families and apartments. Now, not only are people moving from the farms to the cities as they have been, but people are moving from the cities out to these suburban communities. Where now individual, nuclear families, okay, this is where the nuclear family comes in. The idea, it's you, your spouse, your kid, living in your own home. It's no longer you, your spouse, your kid, your parents, your spouse's parents, which, oh my God, I could not understand how people could do that. If you do, you have my sympathy. I say that because I hate my in-laws and they hate me. My mother-in-law tried to shoot me once. It's all sorts of awesome. Spoiler, if you learn nothing else from this class, life lesson from Dr. Prince. When your mother-in-law asks you to teach her how to shoot a gun, don't do it, okay? My mother-in-law is, my wife's about my age, but my mother-in-law is in her 60s. Yeah, there's nothing like, literally, I'm showing her how to do. She has a loaded gun. She holds it gangster style, points it at my chest and says, now what do? Well, I myself am flashing back through my childhood and history of bad decisions. How about you? Now it's just you and your family. We're getting away from this idea of it takes a village to raise a child. So now we're having more people having kids, but the family units themselves become isolated. We see economic expansion. Bear in mind, in many of these cases, okay, we see, and I've got here the stereotype of the Leave It to Beaver housewife. What I mean by that is the separate spheres ideology is the idea that, ladies, your sphere is around the home. You cook, you clean, you make babies, and you teach those kids, what was the 19th century term? The virtues of Republican motherhood. You teach these children how to be good Republicans. Not big R Republican as in the political party, but how to be good Americans, people who will take part in the Republican process. Whereas men, our job is the working sphere. We go out into the world, we, get the job, we bring home the food, the wife cooks it. And it's a division of labor type thing. And that's what they held on to in the 1950s. Although 1/3 of, wives are working, although more women are working in the 1950s than any time before, if you had to work, it was almost seen as a sign of, well, you were poor or your family was not well off. It was expected that the husband would make enough money that the mother could stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom. Now, on the one hand, you might say, okay, well, that sounds, cool or whatever. But this is a direct reaction to the 1940s when, women are outside, working, building tanks, driving machines, working in factories. Most of why this is done is because men don't want competition in the workforce. Okay? Men want good jobs, so women are, we create this idea that, and I say we, I had nothing to do with it. If I did, my wife would literally kick my ass. So, this idea that women work in the home so that men can go get the jobs, and it's less job competition. Now, what's interesting is most jobs are paying well. Most families have at least one car. We see more and more families starting to get things like televisions, okay? And televisions, by the way, which, $379 for, a 16-inch TV and record player. Oh, and it's black and white only. TVs started to be a big thing in the 1950s. Granted, there's only 3 things to watch, including the TV show Leave It to Beaver, which I will post and I'll make a note of it. To really get at the sexism of this, media is a good outlet. Okay, media ensures that conformity. This idea, we create a TV show that shows what society wants, and then people try to live up to it. Which I say now, I'm imagining a bunch of people trying to live up to the Kardashians, and damn you, society. But it's this idea that, now Leave It to Beaver thing, you've got the husband who goes out and work, you have, it's told from the child's perspective, the stay-at-home mom who cleans, da-da-da. But the clip I like to post, really sexism, is they're outside cooking, okay? And the kid's like, Dad, why are you, you always do the cooking out here. Well, men are just better at this outdoor sort of thing, this more rugged type, da-da-da-da-da. It's a throwback to caveman days. Well, okay, that's why you're out here, but inside the house, Mom always cooks. The dad says, well, they say a woman's place is in the home, and if she's in the home, she might as well be in the kitchen. Again, as I'm saying this, I'm expecting my wife to burst through the door and kick my ass. So this is the society of the 1950s. Creating this ideal of the separate spheres argument. Pushing that in, okay? And then people want to live up to that. TV helps, and understand, TV, today you go buy a TV, it's like, whatever, my wife and I have 2 TVs. I'm sure that, many of you have one, at least 1 or 2. I felt bad for her. I know a person, a student last semester who would actually watch these lecture videos on her TV. And I always felt bad because I just imagining other people in her home getting victimized by this, right? I do know I have a face made for radio, but still. But what we're going to see is with TVs, this was a huge neighborhood get together. Okay. What we're going to see with TVs, okay, is not only become the center of family life. Okay. Well, TV dinner, this idea, ready-made dinner so the family can have dinner together watching TV. But we have newsreels and infomercials from the 50s. When you got a TV, you didn't just know what you did. You invited all the neighbors. You made food. It was a thing. Getting a TV was a status symbol. Okay? This meant that you were well-to-do, that you had a lot of money, that you could do things. Getting a TV was an important transitionary period into the 1950s. But realistically, it's a sign of American life at the time. Americans have disposable income. We can buy. I mean, think about it. Prior to the 1950s, what do you need a TV for? Sorry, my allergies are still kind of crazy, so I had to pause it. But think about it. What do you need a TV for? But now it's like, okay, well, I have this money laying around. I can buy stuff on credit. Why not? Why not buy a TV? Why not do something different? It's now a consumer-driven life. It's not about what I need, but about what I want, okay? Factories, again. You have all of those factories built up to build rifles. Consider this. M1 carbines in World War II were manufactured by IBM, so people that make, now computers, but at the time, typewriters. They were made by Rockola, who made jukebox machines. I myself, if you've had a class with me before, I collect antique firearms. I have a 19.3A3 Springfield made by Smith Corona, who, make typewriters, okay? We have all those factories built and set up for that, okay? They've taken massive government funding to expand, tool up, and all that. You can take those machines, maybe not the exact same ones, but you can retool from making a rifle to typewriters, fridges, televisions, whatever you want. You take a society that can build 50 million small arms in 4 years, and you can make a ton of stuff for the civilian market. So now you're making it. Well, how do you sell it? Well, instead of the old school mail order as you would have done in the 19th century, now we get shopping centers. 1946, you have 8. Okay, these are malls basically. 1960, you have hundreds. By 56, they're air-conditioned. And so, what is it? That Crisis at Levittown movie talks about in Levittown, Pennsylvania, the first time they opened a shopping mall, 40,000 people flocked to the opening of a shopping mall because it's new and different. For those you guys, I assume, although you're taking an online class, most of you have had an in-class course in Stillwater. That's like the entire population of Stillwater going to a single mall. Okay, I hope nobody's claustrophobic. All right. So it's a society in transition, and yes, we'll hit the cult of domesticity, and this is the key of that separate spheres argument. The idea, domesticity, it's from the 19th century. Women are to be domesticated. That's the idea. Women, you work in the home. People try to push you, go be housewives. Or there was this idea, okay, you would go, go to high school, you'd go to college, you'd earn some money, you'd have your fun, then you'd get an MRS degree, meet somebody, and then you would go with your new husband, and you would be a housewife. Okay, we're going to see this new consumerism, creating stereotypes of what women want and need, but it's all with a really sexist bent. And I've got a bunch of ads that, we might find funny now, but I'm sure at least one or two ladies, you're going to get pissed off, and rightly so. Understand, when you hear people say, we need to take America back, or we need to make America great again, or how the 50s were the greatest decade, that is not true for everyone, okay? And so what we're going to see is, if you see the fact that there are women who work outside the home, there are women who are tired of these ads, you can see why in the 60s we get second wave feminism, because it's clear that women, if not second class citizens, well, Well, let's be blunt. Let's use Betty Friedan in The Feminine Mystique, 1963, called marriage a comfortable concentration camp. And you can almost understand that resentment when you see some of these ads. Things like this. The chef, which is this, food processor, does everything but cook. That's what wives are for. And this is reinforcing that stereotype. Women, a man marries you so that you cook his food. If your husband ever finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee, if he discovers you're still taking chances on getting flat stout coffee, woe be unto you. Okay, are we encouraging domestic violence? I mean, I know she looks a little happy about it, but, it's, come on. I mean, what is it? I'm just thinking, what is it, the new X-Men movie? It had the villain choking Jennifer Lawrence, okay, as, Mystique, I think? I'm not an X-Men fan, sorry, I'm more, other, not X-Men Marvel superheroes, go Captain America. But, it's a billboard, and it's a screen cap from the movie. And people freaked out saying, this encourages violence against women. This is horrible. They had to pull the billboards. But yet, nobody would have cared in the 1950s. Wives, oh God, this one. Look at this ad over carefully. Circle the items you want for Christmas. Show it to your husband. If he does not go to the store immediately, cry a little. Not a lot, just a little. He'll go. What the hell? Telling, this, it creates a stereotype that, oh no, a woman's crying, all right, go buy her something to shut her up, This idea, this idea that clearly women and men are not equal. And if you look at this stuff, is it fun stuff a woman might want? No. It's, food processors, toasters, teapots, it's kitchen stuff. It's literally, you're saying, go cry to your husband to get kitchen stuff. Or here, this one just throws it out there. Men are better than women. And it's an ad for sweaters. And yeah, it's just this, holding this woman to, what the what? Or here, Schlitz beer, don't worry, darling, you didn't burn the beer. Oh no, the man in the suit coming home from the day's work. Woman, oh, she screwed up dinner. Oh no, she's crying because she screwed up dinner. Okay, seriously, if you've ever heard the idea that women are the weaker sex, it comes from the 50s. Even older than that, but it's this push that women are subservient, inferior, incapable. That's what the 50s are pushing through these ads. Show her it's a man's world. Ties, women serving him breakfast in bed. I'm just going to say this. If I tried some of this crap with my wife, you would have somebody else here Monday, giving you another lecture. Okay? That's how sexist these things are. But are these ads creating the sexism? No. They are a reflection of the sexism that's already there. Understand, the 1950s, on the one hand, and this is, a creature from, Fallout, because there's a lot of hands here. On the one hand, it's a prosperous society. On the other, it's very racist. On the other, it's very sexist. And on the other, we're all cowering in fear from nuclear warfare. It is a massive society it's a mass contradiction of just all this stuff, and it almost does not make sense. And if we look, media helps push the fear, push this cult of domesticity, push the sexism and racism. Televisions. By 1954, 55% of houses had one TV set. By 1962, 90%. This became an American phenomenon. Well, okay, what I just showed you were magazine ads. But now you can do television ads. So again, ads, mass marketing, telling you what you should buy. After all, we have factories building all this crap. We've got to convince you need it. We've got to convince, and it might be an easy sell. Okay, you've just done your time fighting World War II. You want to make your life easy. But it's going to be a hard sell to tell grandma what she needs to buy, I mean, I just have this image of old grandparents in the 50s. Well, we didn't use that back before plumbing, so we don't need it now. You got to convince them to buy this stuff. By 1960, and this isn't even television, $692 million spent on radio advertising. $692 million. You could literally buy 10 World War II heavy cruisers for that. That is how much money we are spending. Okay? Consider this. What, 2-point-something billion dollars for Project Manhattan in 1947, now 1960, 692. And again, it's this, and that's just radio advertising, because what we're going to see is, of the media, television, I know this is going to be shocking, television was seen as the proper media. Radio was rebellious. You don't want to listen to radio and that newfangled music, that damn new rock and roll. Literally, by the way, people hated rock and roll at the time. Once it starts coming out, the older people, because it literally, they would say, it makes people's hips gyrate in unchristian fashion. It's just like, no, you're not supposed. It's again against that conformity. You're not supposed to do this. You can see comic books are going to be very popular at the time. And I've got here the violent video games of their day. People saying, oh, well, that game is too violent, or little kids shouldn't be playing that. That's what they said about comic books. Oh, well, you don't need to see, Batman slapping Robin saying, shut up, blah, 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 blah. You don't need to see da-da-da-da-da. But comic books, had been going since the 40s, become kind of, I won't say fallen out of favor, but not even niche market, but again, controversial in the 50s. And then by the 60s, I mean, that was a comic book generation, okay? So again, we see a contradictory society, a society in change, not sure where it wants to go, not even sure of itself, but all of the stuff, I mean, there's a line from Scott Adams, who's the author of Dilbert, and it was in his old Dilbert Principle book, like a fire hose gushing in a teacup, okay? That's kind of what's going on here. All of this stuff, and it was hard for people at the time to just be able to take it all in. Especially at the time when we're creating, and now we're going to drift back into that Cold War idea, the post-war consensus. This is a society in change, okay? All different sort of stuff, new ideas, different stuff. But at the same time, in light of the Cold War, the government and society wanted people to enter lockstep. We all have to act, think the same way. We want conformity. We want to forge an American spirit. We want to, draw connections past. Well, look, we fought for freedom back then. There's a thing when we get to Vietnam, a movie I might show, it's called A Nation Builds Under Fire. And John Wayne went to Vietnam and shot this, short movie about, what's going on in Vietnam, how we're fighting, what we're trying to do there. And there's a part that goes, well, they say, the VC say that we're not good at fighting a guerrilla war. Well, apparently they never heard of 1776. It's a horrible John Wayne voice, I know, but yeah. Yeah, but what he doesn't look at is 1776. We were the guerrillas. All we've proven is that, yes, the VC can win. No, you're saying the wrong thing, John Wayne. No. But it's that part of this idea, we have to go to the past. What's going on in the past? You're going to see things, 1956, Dwight Eisenhower, by executive order, inserts under God into the Pledge of Allegiance. You hear all these people today, and it's apparently a hot topic today. Well, you shouldn't remove, the under God from the Pledge of Allegiance because this is a Christian nation. One, no, it's not. This nation was never, ever, ever, in no way, shape, or form founded on Christian principles. The founding fathers were by and large deists, okay? Number two, under God in the Pledge of Allegiance was put in there by executive order in the 50s because for two reasons. One, it was a way to highlight a difference between the United States and the Soviet Union. After all, if we, the free world nation, are under God, we are implicitly saying that the Soviets are not, that the Soviets are bad. And especially since the Soviets had no state-sponsored religion, the Soviets were, officially anti-religious, we're playing, okay, if the bad guys are anti-religious, we're going to play up our religious, play up our religious feeling. There, I can say that word. Okay? Again, we're not looking at what comes after. We're not looking that people are going to be so tied to this after the Cold War. This was simply a Cold War expedient. And also there was thoughts that if, it's a way to trip up commies. That if someone's an ardent communist pledging allegiance to the United States, that they would stumble over under God and, you're a communist, now we can root you out of the State Department. So what's the point of this consensus feeling? Okay, it's simple. It's to basically enforce in the minds of all Americans that the United States is good and the Soviet Union is bad. It's a desire to make sure that we don't want anybody saying, well, hey, maybe the Soviets aren't that bad. Maybe, we did some things wrong. Because if you're planning for nuclear war, you cannot have any sort of deviation. You have to, full on be willing to take down the enemy. Hence why we have this consensus feeling. Now I mentioned that all of this fear has to go somewhere. And so we get this in the form of Joseph McCarthy. And one of the things I will do, especially if it's somebody I don't like, I will find the goofiest picture I possibly can. It's also just kind of fun. Even if I do like him, I'll try to find a goofy picture. But Joe McCarthy is a Republican senator from Wisconsin, elected in 1947. And, he's not that likable. But what he does is he wants to make a name for himself. And so anti-communism was the way to get elected. The Republican Party historically has been kind of a single-issue party. Okay, you've got slavery when it first gets elected, then big business, then expansion, then big business again. Well, now we need something else. And so they seize on anti-communism. Who can be tougher on communism? And so McCarthy he gets a groundswell of support because he taps in to that fear. He would give a speech, and what he would do is say, I have a list of names of 250, known communists in the State Department. And every time he would give the speech, the number of names would change, but nobody seemed to care. And the way he would do it, there's accusations. You don't need evidence in the age of McCarthy. What he would do is he would simply do this. Okay, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And you say no. Holds up a blank sheet of paper. Well, I have evidence that you were in the Communist Party. I have evidence that you're a communist. Okay, well, now you're that guy's employer. Word gets out that you're employing a communist, nobody shops at your place. You fire him. His landlord, well, nobody's going to want to live there if he's harboring communists. He gets evicted. Boom. That guy has been what we call blacklisted. He's lost his house, he's lost his job, and there is not one shred of evidence he was a communist. And above all, where in the United States Constitution does it say you can't be a communist? If you want to be, that is your American right. Doesn't mean I'm not going to make fun of you later. And I say this, my very best friend from high school, he and I, we went off to college together, we were roommates, and he was so proud because he joined the Youth Communist League, okay? Well, then he went to another university for a bit, and then he came back to finish at the university we started at. And he saw me, and he's like, so Justin, I have to tell you, I resigned from the Communist Party. Okay, well, why? Well, I found out they were too corrupt. Where the hell have you been the past 50 years? Like, seriously. However, did it occur to me to bring, my roommate's a communist? No, because that's his right. But in the 50s, we're so scared you could be blacklisted. To get this job, teaching at a university, okay, I would have to sign a loyalty oath that says that under no circumstances Will I teach any of you anything about Marxist-Leninist ideology? I will not berate the United States. I will not, advance the cause of the Soviet Union. We're clearly afraid of anything communist. And why? Because we're literally playing a dangerous game, okay? We're so afraid of communism. We break international law. We build this thing, the U-2 spy plane. We overfly the Soviet Union. We're flying stupidly high, and we try to say, well, hey, 80,000 feet, that's no longer your airspace. It's over your country, and we can take pictures of your country. We would lose our minds if the Soviets did that to us. But we're just so paranoid. Why? Because there are, in fact, communist agents in the United States government. There has been, and we know this as a fact, Soviet espionage, Soviet spies since the 1920s. The Soviets stole plans for our B-29 bomber and re-engineered it as the Tupolev Tu-4. They stole plans for the Fat Man atomic bomb. Joe 1 is a copied Fat Man. They know what we're doing. They create the KGB in 1954 as partly a spy agency. And now I'm thinking, Archer and, I miss the season 1, season 2 KGB plot lines. I really do. Now they've moved more modern, but still. Now what we're going to see is, I call this a dangerous game because spying, espionage. Things you would think that a nation of the free would not necessarily do. Well, if they're going to do this, they're going to have espionage. We take the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, our World War II spy agency, and we change it to the Central Intelligence Agency. 1956, July 10, 56. So, 1 month from today, I'm recording this on June 10, 1 month from today will mark 60 years since the first U-2 flight. We begin actively spying on Eastern Europe, the Warsaw Pact, and the Soviet Union. We want to know where their airfields are. We want to know where their rocket bases are. We want to know how many missiles they have, where they're at, and try to work out, okay, if we think missile has X range and it's here, what are its probable targets? Because we are terrified of nuclear warfare. Hopefully you got this from the Reds documentary, but things like this. Klaus Fuchs, this was the guy I was talking about, worked on the atomic bomb, gave secrets to the Soviets. Why? Because he rightly believed that the atomic bomb should not be in the hands of one nation. Otherwise, what's to stop that nation from imposing its will on everybody? Also, hopefully you watch the Reds because the sad story of the Rosenbergs, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were convicted of spying. They're arrested for passing atomic secrets. Why? Because the Soviets blew up a bomb in 1949. We were planning they would have one by the mid-50s. Earlier than expected, so our natural thought is, okay, somebody had to help them. Now, hopefully you get it from the documentary, and again, when I post the doc, please watch it. There's not really that much evidence here. They are ardent communists. They admit to that fact. So, well, if you're communist, then yeah, you probably helped the Soviet Union. So, they were convicted. People did not like the conviction, but it was upheld, and they were executed on June 19, 1953. And there's a scene in that documentary, I'll relay it here, where they went to, these young lawyers went to the judge and said, overturn it. And the judge said, if I was your age and in your position, I would make the exact same argument. But when you're as old as I am, you'll understand why I can't grant this appeal, and walks out. If the judge had said, okay, I'm going to stay the execution or overturn the conviction, he would have been labeled a communist. Then he would have been blacklisted. Just literally. Have you ever seen the movie The Crucible? Okay, it's about the Salem witch trials way back in 1692. And in the Salem witch trials, all that had to happen is, you're a witch. Okay, well, we think you're a witch, so we're going to go out and, you're going to be executed or forced to confess. I remember the story of Giles Corey, who They said he was a warlock. So what they did is they laid him on the ground and started covering him with stones to try to, crush him. And they're like, confess, confess, confess. And they had it where, they knew one or two more stones. This guy's dead. And they said, okay, do you have anything you finally wish to say? And his last words were, give me more stones. Put one more on his and it collapses his ribcage and kills him. It only stops when it gets out of hand when somebody accuses the wife of the governor of Massachusetts. And then the royal governor's like, oh, okay, you guys are idiots. No, we're stopping this. That was written... Now, the Salem witch trials were real, but the Crucible was written in the 50s as an allegory for the Cold War. All anybody had to do was say, you're a communist. If you don't like me, which I hope you do, feel free to give me feedback. If I'm doing something you don't like, let me know. I pay attention to my prof reviews. So far, they're good. I try to change things when there's a problem. But if you don't like me, instead of going to rate my prof and saying this guy's an a-hole, or, my favorite negative review from a survey class a year ago, the professor was very crude. What's your favorite thing about this class? It's 2 days a week. Instead of doing that, all you'd have to go do is send an email to the history department head. Dr. Prince is a communist. That's it. My career is over. You don't need proof. You don't need any of that. Just, he's a communist. He said Vladimir Lenin is the greatest human being on the planet. That's it. My career's done. Here are the Rosenbergs. There's no evidence that they passed secrets. We don't have, there's no evidence that they did this. There's no evidence they committed treason. But we're so afraid that we're not going to let legal precedent and rationality stand in the way. Why? Because guys like McCarthy are just, you're a communist, you're a communist. There's communists. Oh, we've all got to do something about the communists. And if we look, J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI, he was an ardent anti-communist as well. Who wasn't in the 50s? But whereas McCarthy was anti-communist for votes, Hoover instead was anti-communist out of ideology. For him, he says, look, we need facts. We need proof that these people are communists. We need proof they're breaking the law. However, that doesn't stop him. And again, if there's something you actually take from this class, okay, I want you to know about the program known as COINTELPRO, the Counterintelligence Program. What this was a secret program the United States government enacted to basically survey and spy on its own citizens, and if need to, resort to assassination. Okay, we know that guy's a communist, he's not broken laws, just, do a police raid and just take him out. Okay? Was this widely used? No, but it is something the government did. And why? Because fear. When you're showing little kids duck and cover, and again, I hope you watch that, TLDR, at any time, at any place, with no reason, you're going to see the flash of the atomic bomb. Okay? Who's going to bomb us? Communists. You've got fear of attack, fear of subversion, fear of destruction against the United States government. You just have all of this fear, and fear makes people do crazy stuff. And out of that, we get HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. And I love HUAC for one reason. Is that not the creepiest freaking portrait of Dwight David Eisenhower on the planet? It's so creepy. And imagine, are you a communist? You have to stare up at, Dwight's pearly whites. Ugh, crazy. Now, HUAC, this had been an old 30s thing. Why? Because we don't want communists in the State Department. Neither do we want fascists. Pretty much, these are people that just don't like the FDR administration, so nothing really gets done. But it gets reenacted after the war, when we're afraid of the Soviet Union. They bring it back because they say, okay, now we actually have to deal with these sorts of problems. So what HUAC does, it investigates private citizens. It investigates the government. It investigates anybody that comes before it. And again, this is where that blacklisting comes in, because HUAC, and there was something similar in the Senate, if you were brought in to testify, then that could be enough to kill your career. If if the testifying went to you were accused of being a communist. Out of that, I mean, we can really see, let me find it here, the Hollywood 10. Okay, these were 10 actors, directors, screenwriters that worked in Hollywood. And they were communists, and they were brought before HUAC and the Senate committees, and they were, okay, have you now or are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And many of these guys, people in Hollywood knew they were communists. They were writing under pseudonyms. But it's this whole, what laws have we broken? Why can't we be communists? I mean, come on. It's California. It's already like 30 degrees to the left of center anyway. But what happens? They protest. They refuse to testify. They say, look, we don't recognize your right to do this. There's one, and I think it was mentioned in the Reds video, where he says, look, I want to see the evidence you have against me. Oh, you do you? Yes, I want to know what I've been charged with. Well, we'll tell you, get him off the stand. Again, you're never presented with evidence. It's just simply, you're suspected from communist ties. That's it. And so we see in Hollywood, which again is left of center, whereas today, how many times you have to say, well, there's no conservatives in Hollywood. In the 50s, being a liberal in Hollywood was a risky business. You could be jailed. Okay, all the Hollywood 10 are actually going to be jailed. They're going to be barred from working in Hollywood. A few will even commit suicide. Until the 1960s, if you had any suspected communist ties, you would be blacklisted. It would be simply a case of, oh, well, we didn't think you're a communist, so sorry, you can't work on this picture. Doesn't matter if you're just a grip or the leading man. If you have communist ties, it's not going to happen. And again, you don't need facts. It was just simply, I have evidence that you're a communist, and that's enough. Now, Hollywood at the time is going to help generate this anti-communist propaganda, both to recapture its image, but again, with media does two things, and this is why I give you the option of a movie review. With movies, film, TV, radio, whatever, it both influences the culture, but it's also reflective of the culture, okay? If you're in a liberal society, okay, liberal in the sense of, 30 degrees left of center, okay, then you're not going to really get anti-communist propaganda. The audience has to be receptive, so because it's receptive, your propaganda, it's what they want to see. It's reflective of the society. So quite literally, the 50s, people are losing their minds. If you've ever played Fallout, okay, some of the paranoia you see on there is not exactly untrue. And if you listen to the music, especially Fallout 4, that's actual 50s and 60s music. Atom Bomb Baby, stuff like that. The 60-Minute Man, stuff like that. That's all legit 50s music. It's a society that's new stuff going on. It's richer, it's got more stuff, but it's fueled by fear. And the fear of communism eventually is going to start to burn itself out. Maybe not fear of communism, but at least as much when we get to the Army McCarthy hearings. These were televised hearings in 1954. Again, you have TV. Let's open it up to the world. Look at, all these damn communists. But what happens is McCarthy starts trying to say there are communists in the Army. Eventually, he starts accusing officers, generals, all this stuff. But TV is a great medium. We'll talk about this fact when we get to the Civil Rights Movement. It's one thing to hear about it on the radio. It's one thing to read about it in the newspaper. It's another thing to see it live. McCarthy ousts Red Clown. And that's an actual newspaper headline I sometimes use. Okay, yeah, whatever. Here on the radio, McCarthy really stuck it to the communists today. Okay, yeah. But when you watch the hearings, and I think it's in Reds, but otherwise I'll post a video of it. When you see the guy, McCarthy shifts from the defendant, starts attacking the lawyer. Well, isn't it true that you da-da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-da-da, and literally the defendant has to be like, I'm the one on trial, not, why are you besmirching this guy? Why are you doing that? Then eventually, guys, literally, have you no decency, sir? Have you at long last, da 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 da, and just tears into McCarthy. People see this and they're shocked. Yeah, we don't like communists. We don't want communists. But really, we have to go this far? And so McCarthy will eventually be censured in the Senate. His power will be broken. He will be, voted out of office. And he will die more or less broke and an alcoholic. Again, for McCarthy, it wasn't about actual I don't like communists. It was about power. Okay? Demagogues use fear to rush into power. They tap into that fear to stay in power. Okay? McCarthy, and that's the difference between Hoover and McCarthy. Hoover wants to actually get rid of communists. McCarthy simply wanted power, and it went to his head. He didn't produce results, and he just went too far. So what does all of that mean? If we look at the United States in the 1950s, we're trying to create a new American identity. This, consumer-driven, nuclear family, free society. But at the same time, we're afraid of communists. So much so, we'll give a demagogue enough power to simply say, you might be a communist, and then you, out of fear, would not hire him or give him a job or break up with them or not go to school with them. Okay? We're terrified of nuclear war. I mean, literally, we're telling our kids that at any time, at any place, at any moment, boom. We have amazing prosperity. But at the same time, a desire for conformity. We need to all act the same, look the same, do the same stuff. If you advocate feminism, you might be a communist. If you advocate civil rights, you might be a communist. If you do anything that, kind of strays from the beaten path, you might be a communist. And so it's within that system that, and this is where we'll pick up next time, when the civil rights movement finally gets going. Okay, we just talked about 1954. That's the same year as Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. This is the same time as now African Americans, fueled by the Second World War, finally say, no, we're tired of being a second-class citizen. Well, that contrasts with this desire for conformity, and that's going to lead to an internal struggle, where, and this is also one of the things, kind of leading in, Cold War and civil rights, we tear ourselves apart over the issue of integration, that white people and black people should do the same stuff and live together. And the Soviets have a field day. They rightly point out, how are you guys the land of the free if this, okay? So the 1950s, it's American extremism. And not extremism as in, and by extremism, what I mean is just different points of view. An uber-free society, but yet conformity. We want to be the good guys and different than the Soviets, but yet we're going to have people as second-class citizens. It's all struggling to try to find itself. And so what we're going to do, that'll wrap it up for this week. We'll pick up with the civil rights movement on Monday. It'll probably start with a documentary, or a film, because there's some really good stuff I like to show. But we will talk about that then on Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye-bye, guys.